Om Ajnanatimidandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Dhena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Sarasatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiraye. We're continuing our reading of the Srimad Bhagavatam. This morning's verse is from the first canto, 5th chapter, Narada's instructions on Srimad Bhagavatam for Vyasadeva, and the text number is 16. That's 1516. Vachakshanosyaarhati veditum vibhor Ananta parasya nivrittata sukham Pravartamanasya gunaranatmanas Tato bhavan darshaya cheshtitum vibho. Yeah.
Vachakshanosyaarhati veditum vibhor
Vachakshanosyaarhati veditum vibhor
Anantaparasya nivrittata sukham
Anantaparasya nivrittata sukham
Pravartamanasya gunaranatmanas
Pravartamanasya gunaranatmanas
Tato bhavandarshaya cheshtitam vibho.
Tato bhavandarshaya cheshtitam vibho. Vaishnavis?
No one has a device.
Anyone? Anyone? Okay.
Come on. You can do it.
Vachakshanosyaarhati veditum vibhor
Vachakshanosyaarhati veditum vibhor
Anantaparasya nivrittata sukham
Anantaparasya nivrittata sukham
Pravartamanasya gunaranatmanas
Pravartamanasya gunaranatmanas
Tato bhavandarshaya cheshtitam vibho.
Tato bhavandarshaya cheshtitam vibho. Vichakshana. Very expert. Asya. Of him. Arhati. Deserves. Veditum. To understand. Vibho. Of the Lord. Anantaparasya. Of the unlimited. Nivrittata. Retired from. Sukham. Material happiness. Pravartamanasya. Those who are attached to. Gunai. By the material qualities. Anatmana. Devoid of knowledge and spiritual value. Tata. Therefore. Bhavan. Your goodness. Darshaya. Show the ways. Cheshtitam. Activities. Vibho. Of the Lord. Translation: the Supreme Lord is unlimited. Only a very expert personality, retired from the activities of material happiness, deserves to understand this knowledge of spiritual values. Therefore, those who are not so well situated due to material attachment should be shown the ways of transcendental realization by your goodness through descriptions of the transcendental activities of the Supreme Lord. Please repeat. The Supreme Lord is unlimited. Only a very expert personality, retired from the activities of material happiness, deserves to understand this knowledge of spiritual values. Therefore, those who are not so well situated due to material attachment should be shown the ways of transcendental realization by your goodness through descriptions of the transcendental activities of the Supreme Lord. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Theological science is a difficult subject, especially when it deals with the transcendental nature of God. It is not a subject matter to be understood by persons who are too much attached to material activities. Only the very expert who have almost retired from materialistic activities by culture of spiritual knowledge can be admitted to the study of this great science. In the Bhagavad Gita, it is clearly stated that out of many hundreds and thousands of men, only one person deserves to enter into transcendental realization. And out of many thousands of such transcendentally realized persons, only a few can understand the theological science specifically dealing with God as a person. Sri Vyasadeva is therefore advised by Narada to describe the science of God directly by relating his transcendental activities. Vyasadeva is himself a personality expert in this science, and he is unattached to material enjoyment. Therefore, he is the right person to describe it. And Shukadeva Goswami, the son of Vyasadeva, is the right person to receive it. Srimad Bhagavatam is the topmost theological science, and therefore it can react on the layman as medicinal doses. Everyone say medicinal doses. Because it contains the transcendental activities of the Lord, there is no difference between the Lord and the literature. The literature is the factual literary incarnation of the Lord. So the layman can hear the narration of the activities of the Lord and thereby associate with Him, and thus they will gradually become purified from the material disease. The expert devotees also can discover novel ways and means to convert the non-devotees in terms of particular time and circumstance. Devotional service is dynamic activity, and the expert devotees can find out competent means to inject it into the dull brains of the materialistic population. Such transcendental activities of the devotees for the service of the Lord can bring a new order of life to the foolish society of materialistic men. Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his subsequent followers exhibited dexterity in this connection.
Did it say expert dexterity?
Huh?
Did it say expert dexterity there?
Yep. Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his subsequent followers exhibited expert dexterity in this connection. By following the same method, one can bring the materialistic men of this age of quarrel into order for peaceful life and transcendental realization. Vachakshano syarhati veditum vibor anantaparasya nivrittata sukham pravartamanasya gunaranatmanas tato bhavan darshaya cheshtitum vibho. The Supreme Lord is unlimited. Only a very expert personality retired from the activities of material happiness deserves to understand this knowledge of spiritual values. Therefore, those who are not so well situated due to materials of transcendental realization by your goodness through the descriptions of the transcendental activities of the Supreme Lord. So, Prabhupada first points out that it's not so easy to understand spiritual knowledge. And the first word of the word vichakshana, which Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita says, Bhogaishvarya prasaktanam taya prahita chetasam vyavasayatmika buddhir samadhaun navadiyate. The meditation on the Lord, the ability to actually think of God doesn't happen for those whose minds are distracted by the material energy and thinking about enjoying it. And therefore, most people are unable to actually conceive of the science of God. Through speculation, some people can understand impersonal, the idea of God being non-material, but the conclusion they come to that He's impersonal is the limit of what they're able to do. Here Prabhupada says to understand that there's a person from whom everything else emanates is very difficult to understand. So discrimination is something Krishna also mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita. Nasato vidite bhavo, na bhavo vidite sata, upariyod apridushnontas tvanayos tatvadarshibhi. That those who have seen the truth can see that there's an energy that is temporary, fleeting, therefore it's called non-permanent. It's insubstantial compared to that which is permanent and eternal, the spiritual energy. And in the Sri Upanishad, it is said, Anyadevahur sambhavad, anyadahura sambhavat, iti shushumadhiranam yenas tadvijichakshire. That there's a difference. When you focus your attention on the material energy, you get one result, and when you focus it on the spiritual energy, you get a different result. The word worship comes from the word worth. And when you put ship on the end of a word, it makes it a noun. Previously, the word was known as, was worth-ship, but by Sunday rules, it became worship. But interesting that the word worth, the value that a materialistic person puts in the material energy, Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, is the polar opposite of the values the spiritualist who understands the difference between the two energies puts into concentration on the Lord. Yanisha sarvabhutanam, tasyam jagrati samyami, tasyam jagarti bhutani sanisha pashatomuni. The person who is educated in a spiritual science and understands the value and the difference between the two energies, the vichakshana, can discriminate between the two things, is awake in spiritual activities, whereas the materialist thinks that such a person, a spiritual person, is wasting his time. You know, I saw Savas out pacing the parking lot. I think that was you. She had a hat on early in the morning. And then I saw some other people just coming home from somewhere. And it was like 4:30 in the morning. And they just got back, and they're probably wondering, what's he doing up? And Savas is wondering, what are they doing just getting back? The materialist and the spiritual pass each other. So here, vichakshana, syarhati veditum vibhor, the person who is discriminating and understanding the two energies and the value of concentrating on the spiritual energy, it can understand the science of spiritual life, and other people cannot, he's saying. So it's difficult to understand. So what's the point? Prabhupada goes on to say, as he's expounding on the verse, that even those that are not able to discriminate between material and spiritual so well, they're not so expert, which practically describes everyone according to the sages at Naimisaranya. In the age of Kali, they say, I believe it's Shaunika, Prayinal Parisha Shabya Kalavazminugajana Manda Sumanda Matayo Manda Bhagya Hupadrita. In the Iron Age of Kali, men have but short lives. They're quarrelsome, lazy, misguided, unlucky, and above all, always disturbed. And so it's very difficult for anybody to understand the spiritual science and what to speak of discriminate between matter and spirit. So what is the ashauti, or the medicine? How to cure this? This is by introduction of the Srimad Bhagavatam. That's the whole point in this chapter, that Narada is saying, introduce the Srimad Bhagavatam to people, let them hear it. And because it has spiritual potency, sound vibration itself can cure the disease that they have, which is attachment to matter. In the last purport to the 15th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Srila Prabhupada says that in order to advance in spiritual life, one must overcome weakness of heart. And he defines weakness of heart as the tendency to become attached to matter and to covet it and not want to let go of it. So how can that be done? There has to be a solvent. Have you ever spilled something on your cloth or some other valuable thing that you have, and then you wondered how to get it out?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I have.
So Vasi's laughing. He must have happened.
They all have, but they
So the answer is you have to have a solvent. And there are actually websites which describe what are the particular solvents that will take out the particular stain. And some of them have to do with baking soda, and other times you use carbonated water, vinegar. These are solvents, and the universal solvent for the entrenchment in material matters by the living entity is the transcendental vibration of the Srimad Bhagavatam. This was Prabhupada's determination when he was coming to America. That's why he wrote in his diary the verses that describe how hearing the Srimad Bhagavatam naturally awakens the process of self-realization, because Krishna, the Vidhunoti, is within the heart, and he assists the person who takes the process of hearing the Srimad Bhagavatam. So it would have to be introduced into human society, and from that vibration, people would become naturally purified and be able to take to the process of devotional service. So normally, very qualified people listen to Srimad Bhagavatam, and very qualified people speak the Srimad Bhagavatam. And this is mentioned at the beginning of the 10th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Nivritta tarsharupa giyamana bhavaushada shotra manobirama uttama shloku gunanavada puman virajeta vina pashugnat. It's an answer to a question that comes up in the very first chapter of the Bhagavatam. Kova bhagavatas tasya punya shulkedya karmanaha. Who is there understanding the power of this literature that won't listen to it? Kova bhagavatas tasya. Who won't listen? And then Shukadeva answers in the 10th canto. He says people who are killing themselves. They're engaged in really dark activities, killing animals, and he says killing themselves, atmaha. Nonetheless, a few verses later, Shukadeva Goswami says, Vasudeva Kata Prashna, that, what is the verse? He says, Vasudeva Kata Prashna, I'm crossing verses, but in any case, I'll just tell you what it says. You'll find it 3 verses past Nivritta Tarsha. He says that there's 3 people that are benefited by the recitation of Srimad Bhagavatam. The person who speaks it, the person who listens to it, and then everybody else in between who gets hit by the sound vibration, because it all spills over. And there's a residual effect on the people in general when they come in contact with Bhagavat culture. That is, the devotees really are engaged in Bhagavat culture. What they're doing by regulating their lives is preparing themselves to actually hear Srimad Bhagavatam. That's the main purpose of their activities. What is the verse?
It's Vasudeva Kata Prashna Purushan Srin Punati.
Purushan Trin Punati Hi Vaktaram Vrachakam Shotrins Tatpada Salilam Yata. So it's naming 3 people, Trin, that get purified, and it's just like the waters of the Ganges. It purifies people who speak it, who listen to it, and then anybody else in between who hears the vibration gets purified. So this is the main purpose of the Krishna consciousness movement, is to qualify people through the process of practicing the lifestyle of devotional service, so that they can be discriminating. This is an important aspect of devotional service. Discrimination means to hear Sambandha Gyan. One has to hear it regularly. Regularly means at least every day, because otherwise my mind goes back to the conception that maybe I can enjoy in the material world. And it's important to be able to discriminate, and then to organize one's life so much so that one's in the contacting the sattva gun, because sattvam yad brahmadarshanam, when one's associating with the mode of goodness, it's possible to discriminate between matter and spirit. And from that position, there's combustion. If one hears the Srimad Bhagavatam, one will become transcendently awakened by the sound vibration itself. Another verse that is not so commonly mentioned, well, maybe in a medium, it gets medium traction, but pravishtakarna randrana swanam bhavam saroruham dunoti salilam Krishna salilasya yatasharat. So this verse is mentioned in the Srimad Bhagavatam that says that just by hearing the Srimad Bhagavatam, letting the sound vibration go into one's ears, it installs the Lord within the heart and reestablishes one's personal relationship with Krishna on the throne of one's heart. And it has a systemic way of purifying one's existence and, as pointed out by Srila Prabhupada in the purport, the whole world. And when it's spoken by those who are qualified, especially by the acharyas who speak the Srimad Bhagavatam, there's a possibility of purifying the whole world. And the example that's given in the verse is Salilasya Yata Sharat. In Sharat, in the autumn season, there's a kind of light rain that comes. And somehow or other, that light rain, unlike in the monsoon, which muddies all the rivers and lakes because it comes down so hard, purifies the water and makes it all clear. And so Srila Prabhupada points out that by piecemeal arrangements to purify oneself through self-help or whatever else, whatever other means one takes to, this can only temporarily adjust a very small portion of one's life, and then it reverts. However, if one hears Srimad Bhagavatam, there's a systemic effect. And the whole world can become purified by the words spoken, the Srimad Bhagavatam spoken by a pure devotee, or those who are following in the footsteps of a pure devotee. So this verse indicates, first of all, that it's difficult to understand spiritual science. Vishakshana syarhati veditam vibhor. You can't understand very easily. However, if there's a culture, a Bhagavat culture, in which people are trained to listen to the Bhagavatam and live according to its tenets, then naturally other people will be affected by it. And this verse is saying that they'll be able to take it up also and become benefited by it. So I would argue that this is the sum and substance of our Krishna consciousness movement, and therefore the devotees who are engaged in publishing Srimad Bhagavatam and making it available to the world are carrying forward the primary purpose of Srila Prabhupada, which was to make sure that the vibration was available to people all over the world. It may be important at some point to have brick and mortar in order to have some shelter to live within side. However, most important is to propagate, to ingest and propagate the transcendental sound of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Those are a few opening remarks, and now we'll take some reflections or questions to expand the conversation and the verse. Dravida Prabhu.
There's some question. The verse, as you point out, it sets some kind of a high bar here. You have to be very expert and you have to be self-controlled to really be attached to the Bhagavatam. But wasn't part of Prabhupada's genius following Lord Chaitanya is that wherever you're at, whoever you are, you just chant. You don't even know what it means, but you just get into the chanting, and of those people who chant, they begin to take it seriously. And that kind of awakens at least a preliminary interest in subject matters like this. In other words, there's some hope for those who even may appear to be completely united and out of the realm of those who can be exposed to this theological science. That seems to be the other part of the Hare Krishna movement. In other words, just propagate the holy name, and then people become submissive or interested, at least preliminarily to this science and occulting stuff. Am I
Yes.
off on that?
No, you're never off.
No,
But
I'm off and off.
I would say that there's two parts to the Hare Krishna movement. That's the first part. First part is, first of all, the science understanding, as mentioned early on in the Srimad Bhagavatam, apana samsritim goran yanama vivashogrinan tata sadyo vimucheta yabhibheti swayam bhayam. Sutta Goswami says early on that the holy name and Krishna are non-different. And then a couple chapters later, we have Krishna swadhamo pagate dharmagadadi bisaha kalunashta drishamesha purar narko danodita. The Srimad Bhagavatam is the incarnation of Krishna and no difference. And therefore, and our Acharyas comment, sixth canto of Srimad Bhagavatam goes into Shukadev Goswami goes into detail about the power of the holy name, even if the power is unknown. If somebody hears it, as in Prabhupada's words, while they're chanting, even unknowingly, their chanting is being recorded and counted. Nonetheless, we can see from the life of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who you brought up, that he considered something else, and that is the way it's delivered. As an example, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, when he understood that people were disrespecting him in his own hometown, he took sannyas. And that was to more perfect the delivery system, because he understood, I take sannyas, they'll offer respects to me, they'll be able to take the holy name more deeply because they'll have respect for me. And furthermore, in the pastime of in Benares, when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu visits the Mayavadi sannyasis, Prakashananda Saraswati, Prabhupada says that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came in and he exhibited extreme humility in order to affect the Mayavadi sannyasis, and it worked. So Prabhupada, he sat down in a place that was very humble when he came in. He let everybody else sit up in the higher place. And then Prakashananda Saraswati, though, seeing the effulgence of the Lord and also appreciating his humility, then reached out his hand and pulled him up to a place where he could sit amongst the other sannyasis in an exalted seat. There, Prabhupada says, in his purport, people are already inimical towards Krishna. So he said the members of the Krishna conscious movement shouldn't make them more inimical. And therefore, I would say that there's two parts. Yes, the vibration should be spread far and wide, and even those who are unacquainted with the spiritual science will be affected. But there's also an aesthetic that's very important, and that means that we should go out of our way to deliver the message in such a way that people's hearts open and that they don't become more inimical. And that way it'll be much more effective. So the two things could be considered very carefully. And I would argue that's what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Srila Prabhupada did when they carried out to the distribution of the Bhagavat culture. Other reflections and questions? Savas Prabhu.
Yes, you mentioned that one verse in the Bhagavatam about the characteristics of Kali Yuga.
Yes, the characters of Kali Yuga.
And, short-lived, lazy, unlucky, misguided, always disturbed.
Yes.
So could you speak about that a little bit in terms of, even as a devotee, we experience some of those things. I mean, sometimes we see as a devotee, we're also getting misguided. And sometimes you can see a devotee is very unlucky and disturbed. So could you speak on that?
Sure. Well, first of all, the verse, of course, anyone can become distracted. It's actually one of the limiting factors in devotional service. In other words, to come to Nishta, past Anartha Nivriti, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says there's 5 obstacles. And once you remove those 5 obstacles, or once they diminish because of your participation in hearing transcendental sound vibration, then you come to the platform of nishta, or steadiness in devotional service. So first one is called laya, or sleep, which means that when you start chanting, or when someone opens the Chaitanya Charitamrita Adi Lila Volume 1, you fall asleep or want to go home and take rest. The second is Vishepa, which means to become distracted, the tendency to become distracted. And whenever, maybe you're chanting and then you get distracted to something else. There are three more after that I won't go into right now, but because you asked about that particular thing, can devotees become distracted? And the answer is obviously, and that's why there are so many admonitions given both in the Bhagavad Gita and by the acharyas, saying be careful of being distracted. One of the main practices of devotional service is to be aware that you're doing it. Otherwise, niyamagraha means doing it without being aware that you're doing it. You're kind of like Chaitanya Charan once said, you take a subscription to the gym, everyone does on January 1st. And then you go in for a weekend, you lift the weights, and then you think I like coming to the gym, but lifting the weights, not so much. So then you go into the gym and then you just move your arms. So similarly, you could take up the chanting, and then after a while think, yeah, chanting's very good and it's highly recommended, but as far as concentrating, I don't know, that's a little hard. So I'll just chant, but I won't be even aware that I'm chanting. So therefore, Shastra is always encouraging us, the acharyas are encouraging us, be aware, because if you can, for some time during the day, give full cognition to the fact that I'm doing this now, and I should give full respect to the process, then very quickly somebody can advance in devotional service. Otherwise, not so quickly. And of course, I think, and I've said before, that this verse is predictive of the advent of the smartphone. Probably in Harinal Payushashav, because once somebody asked me, how come the Bhagavatam doesn't specifically predict the technological age? And I said, well, actually, you have to look within this verse, because always disturbed. I was standing one day, above all, always disturbed. The smartphone was, the advent of the smartphone was imminent, and it was predicted in this verse, because there's a whole culture of distraction that comes from that. So the first part, devotees have to be aware of the fact that it's a double-edged sword, technology. You have to use it for the right purpose and not become distracted and taken away from your practice. And the second part of the question was?
Well, I was concerned about the fact that we can become misguided. Devotees become misguided, and they're unlucky.
Yeah. Okay. So right. Exactly. So
you, as a person in administration, you feel that all the time. You have to run into that kind of situation constantly.
Yeah. So that's why it's important to hear every day from authoritative sources, and also to have good guidance, Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra, because there are lots of ways in which one can become misguided by one's own mind, and the living entity is known as tatastha, which means one of the ways I like to express it is saying open to suggestion. Every living entity, a little bit of suggestion from the wrong person, and next thing you know, you're going in the wrong direction. I call it also the mantra effect. Just like Kaikeyi, she was perfectly happy that Ramchandra would be anointed as the regent king, and then Mantra, her maidservant, started whispering in her ear and saying, he's not so good, actually, he's against you.
She's churning up trouble.
She's churning up trouble. Mantra, churning up trouble, that's her name. And then she flipped. Kaikeyi flipped. And no one can underestimate the ability of a jiva, especially in the tenuous material nature, to flip. So one has to really stay focused on authoritative sources and not become distracted. Otherwise, it's really easy by degrees, or even all of a sudden, for very neophyte people, they can just suddenly be flipped and develop a wrong type of attitude. As far as short-lived, ayur harati vaipumsam, the Bhagavatam says, well, absolutely, the sun is taking away your life. And it's even speaking to you as it goes overhead. It's saying, I'm taking away your life. Unless you're engaged in hearing about Krishna. And For the devotees, their lives are so dedicated to the hearing process that the Bhagavatam says their lives are not being diminished; they're being enriched, every day. So, 8th chapter of Bhagavad Gita: devotees don't care when they leave; they stay absorbed in devotional service, and whenever they go, it's okay. Prabhu, you were going to say something.
So also this term manda bhagya. Bhagya means opulence, like Bhagavan, opulence. And the manda part of it means they're very slow to attain any opulence. So they're very that's their misfortune. And this slowness in all the positive aspects of life is one of the hallmarks. So when you see these devotees coming at you, you go, oh yeah, well, that's it. There's that element of the struggle that's required just to kind of achieve anything.
Yes, Prabhu.
Just one editing condition, which I think may be important here. This verse, Prayana Vaisesika Sabya, as Prabhupada had it in his 10th canto, or his first canto here, the word prayana is there, which was lost, almost always. And that almost always applies to all these elements. So in other words, the almost always short-lived and very lazy, misguided, and unlucky. But there are a few who are less lazy, less misguided, and they're more apt to be receptive to a message like this. So that's, important.
Yes, actually that's in this, the commentary of the verse. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur gives two meanings, and one of them is that there are discriminating people in the world, and they'll very easily take to devotional service. And the other meaning he gives as well, there may not be discriminating people, but they'll become discriminating by following the devotees. And he quotes, Yad yad acharati shreshtas tatadevi tarojana, that if there are devotees showing the path of devotional service, then other people can easily take it up. But there needs to be that atmosphere where the hearing and chanting is going on. I was getting off the subway the other day in New York. It was a rainy day, and the subway was packed. And I was with a few devotees, and it's sort of pandemonium getting off. And then I just happened to glance as I got off, and I saw a man who had just disembarked along with us, and then he was standing there with a book, one of Prabhupada's books in his hand, leaning against a pillar, reading it. And I looked around, and one of the devotees had given it to him on the subway. And it really stood out, just as much as in some cinematography, they'll have everything gray except for one character that's lit up. And to me, that scene stuck in my mind, that the grayness of the New York subway system and of the day itself and sort of the overall atmosphere of New York. And then there was this one person amidst the clamor leaning against the pillar with the book, and it was such a bright image. And it brought to mind how penetrating are the literatures themselves, how important they are. Because I saw a human being there. Human beings like reading, Prabhupada says, because they have that chit shakti. And so they like to have their nose in something to gather knowledge. And what is the effect when somebody has a book in their hand? Even with all the other things going on, that will prevail. It'll penetrate. It'll have its effect. Yes, Govardhan Prabhu.
We're reading about the book Bhagavatam. Book Bhagavatam is the person Bhagavatam also. You comment on that? Like in our case, we didn't use Srimad Bhagavatam, but Srila Prabhupada came and used the Bhagavatam.
I'm just repeating, he's asking to comment on the mention of person Bhagavat and book Bhagavat, and the importance of the two is given that the book Bhagavata is there. It's a passive agent. You can read the book Bhagavata if you're so inclined, or you may not. But the person Bhagavata may be a little bit more forceful, proactive. I was hesitating to use that word because it would be more proactive and actually point things out. And so it's helpful to have both. We do notice that people who are person Bhagavatas, they have sublime qualities that people notice. That you don't necessarily see in, like, let's just say New York. People are moving here and there. They're doing activities that are kind of under the modes of nature, not kind of, they are. And, you know, when you see somebody who's from a different culture, the Bhagavat culture, it becomes noticeable. And we find in distributing knowledge randomly to people on the streets, as an example, that people are actually attracted to the quality of the devotee, him or herself. And recently I wrote the introduction to Vijay Prabhu's new book. And that meant I had to read his book first to have integrity in writing the introduction. And it was a real pleasure. He has cataloged a number of incidents where people have encountered devotees and then taken a book. And then how dramatically their lives have changed suddenly just by that interaction. And really, they're remarkable stories. They're anecdotal, no doubt, but the fact is, I started thinking about this. These are only the ones we know about. But my surmise is that every single interaction has its long-term effect. I don't see it, because I'm not privy to everything that happens after the book and the person leave my purview, but it always happens. And so that interaction, that one-on-one interaction between a person who represents the book and the person who's just meandering through the universe, is what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said was the beginning point for somebody's devotional service. When he's teaching Sanatana Goswami, he says that everyone, the living entities in the material world, are wandering. In some places he says loitering, which is a really interesting, I mean, at 7-Eleven they have signs they don't loiter. There's a big sign on the material world, no loitering. So he says they're Brahmanda Brahmate Kon Bhagavat. So he says the wandering soul meets a Vaidya, a Vaishnava who's a doctor. And the doctor, you know, you can imagine carrying a little black bag, like in the movies. He's actually carrying two things. One is instructions, and the other is hymns. He says hymns and instructions. So the hymns, obviously, you know, are this the transcendental vibration of the holy name, and the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the hymns written down. You know, it's written form. So as Prabhupada said, it's more consequential because it goes further. It lasts longer. And then the instructions are important too. So until one meets such a Vaidya, a devotee doctor who gives the yashauti or the medicine, then one can't come out of the material condition. He says that later to Sanatana Goswami, Maya Mugdha Jivara Nahi Swata Krishna Gyan, Jivere Krishnaya Koila, Krishna Veda Puran. That's why Veda Vyas went to all this trouble. That is to put together the vibrations so that it could go out to human society and affect people. But that somebody has to distribute it. And somebody has to be the example also. I mean, I look at observing devotees who have stuck to the Bhagavat culture for many years. I mean, as I was looking at a devotee the other day that I was talking to who has been strictly following the culture for decades. And I was thinking, I don't think he has a material body anymore. I was actually viscerally struck by this fact. You know, I was looking and I was going like, it looks effulgent. It's not like regular skin and bones. It's actually a transcendental personality. And that there was a definite feeling like that. And that's necessary in human society. Otherwise, what you get is a lot of misguided activity. Like, you know, the people yesterday, they're playing that music out here, and they think it's nice. And and I'm not going to say any more about that. Okay, a couple more from the back. Yes, Prabhu.
Even when people do not take a book, it's a change in their life.
Yeah, even if people do not take a book, it's a change in their life. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta told his sannyasis in the mud, he said, you should go out every day and knock at least 3 doors. He said, even if people don't surrender or take kindly to your teachings, he said, at least they'll see, oh, a spiritual person came to my door. And the effect will be there.
So Vijay Prabhu has documented some of the exchanges where people took a book. What to speak of these tens of hundreds of thousands of people who are met by devotees and their lives are from that moment changed.
Yeah, so Vijay Prabhu has documented that hundreds of people who have taken books and been affected. What to speak of the people who have come in contact but haven't? Millions of people haven't. So just
I didn't take a devotee offered me a record, Hare Krishna, the mantra record, and I didn't take it. But I will never forget that moment. I came out of a bank, there stood a devotee, offered me the record. I said, no, I don't buy records on the street. And I will never forget that moment.
I also was offered a Back to God. And actually, I think I bought it. And my friends came over and said, what did you do? You just got ripped off. These are bald guys. And he opened the thing and said, here, we'll throw it away for you. But I kept the stick of incense. And I stuck it in my, there was a little space in my wall in my room, and I put it in there. And I remember every time I'd walk in there, I'd smell it. I didn't light it. It was just sitting there, permeating, and I'd smell it, and I'd think, Hare Krishna. And then later on, somebody brought me a Back to Godhead magazine to my door and said, here, take this. You know, this is, I'm not into it, but I think you'll like it. So yeah, all the anecdotal stuff is there, but you can extrapolate from that and from what the Shastra says of the overall effect. So in conclusion, we're being encouraged by Narada Muni himself to carry on the duties of the BBT, which is really to facilitate the mass distribution of the Srimad Bhagavatam and all of its expansions to the world. And this is ultimately, as Narada's saying here in this chapter, really the only hope for the world. So leaning into the process and becoming dexterous, as Prabhupada mentions at the end, and innovative in ways to do that is the best work that one can get. And so I feel privileged to have sat here for a few minutes to talk about this subject matter in the company of those who have dedicated their whole lives to spreading the Srimad Bhagavatam all over the world. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srila Narada Muni ki jai, Gaur Bhaktivinoda ki jai, Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari Bo, Vancha Kalpadarusha, Kripa Sindhabe Evacha Patitanam Pavanibhyo, Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha, Anantakodi Vaishnavindi ki jai.
Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman, hey, Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman.